for having me. I'll share my screen now. Okay, so as Melissa was saying, for my PhD, I looked at, and also for my honours and my master's, so I've been doing this research for a while now, looking into the psychological effects of chanting. And I'm actually not going to be speaking too much about my research today because, yeah, this is really about media engagement for researchers. And why I'm speaking about this topic is because our research had quite a lot of media attention since my honours. And so I really was thrown in the deep end with a lot of media interviews, television, radio, podcasts, newspaper articles. So I just had quite a bit of experience with it and made many mistakes, which I can share with you, and hopefully we can, fumble through this together. So it's like, it really has been a fumbling through for me, and I had to go and do a lot of research myself on how to engage with the media. So I'm coming from the perspective of a researcher rather than a professional in interview skills, but hopefully there'll be some value in this for everyone. So we'll talk about some of the different types of media, preparing for an interview, what to do during an interview, and then post-interview, and we'll do a summary of that. So different types of media. We have radio, which is, I think, a really, really wonderful one. Radio is our friend because you can get away with quite a bit with radio. So actually, I've got a little telephone there for radio because what I learned is using the landline actually makes for better reception. And so I had to learn how to use a landline. That was step one. But with radio, it is only your voice. And so you can have notes with you, you can be in all of your comfort. You know, I like to, as a meditator, I'm quite comfortable sitting on the floor, which, you know, you wouldn't usually be able to do in an interview. So little things like that, radio, you can get away with it. Television, not so much. You quite naked there, so you can't really have your notes with you. You're not really on your home turf. So it's a really different setting. And with television, you also have to think about your clothing, not only as a form of communication, but there's also little bits that they might even tell you about, that you can't wear really fine stripes because the camera doesn't like it very much. So there's different things that you have to be aware of with television. Podcasts, now they can be like radio, but they are actually becoming more and more video as well as audio. And even if you were in the studio with someone, again, you're not really, you know, you're making eye contact and everything, so you can't have like a lot of notes. I mean, you can, of course you can, but not so much as radio. Print is another, I think there's pros and cons to it, because although it's really friendly interview, you're not being recorded, you're not really put on the spot, there's someone else editing it all for you. That is a pro and a con. Obviously, you don't have quite as much control over what goes out there, and we'll talk about that a bit later on as well. And all of these, well, I guess radio and television, they're the ones that can be either incredibly short, or they can be longer. Podcasts, they're usually quite long, you know, maybe 30 minutes or an hour or even longer. And so they're a little bit more forgiving if you go off topic or you ramble. But if you've got like a 3-minute television slot or a 5-minute radio interview, then you really want to be incredibly concise. We always want to be concise and we always want to stay on topic, but there are medias that are a little bit more forgiving. And then, of course, with all of these, the most important thing is the audience. So always thinking about who you're speaking to. That's really, really the most important thing. So just a few general tips, and we're mostly talking about interviews today, but it all applies to presentations as well. Interviews are sort of, I think, like a bit more of a tricky presentation because you're being put on the spot with different questions and you have a little bit less control or a little bit more spontaneity. So just it all applies to presentations as well. So general tips, stories. I'm sure you've heard stories. People connect with stories, and journalists want you to tell a story. The journalists want you to do well as well. They're on your team, usually. So things like with my research, I think I almost always get asked how I started the research because it's quite an obscure topic, the psychology of chanting. And that actually comes to a backstory of my own mental health issues and me trying chanting. And that can connect me immediately with the audience. And I can choose how much of that to disclose depending on the type of media, depending on how much time I have, and depending on how personal I want to how much information I want to share about myself, because you always have control over that as well. Authenticity. So it's just really important that what you do decide to say or not say, it really aligns with your values, and it's going to come across if it doesn't. You're saying something that's uncomfortable, or, I mean, we're talking about discomfort that's further than the discomfort of public speaking and interviews and that kind of thing. Passion. So I think as researchers, most of us are quite passionate about our topics. We do this because we think it's important, it's meaningful, and we really want that to come through. Like as soon as you're talking to someone and you can tell that they are passionate about what they're speaking about, it's such a different, you're really tuned into that person. So really bring the passion to the interview. Keep it simple. We're all writers as well as researchers, and we know that it can be really difficult to make all these really quite complex ideas simple. And so we want to do that in the preparation phase and making sure that we're always bringing the audience with us. Sound bites. So again, just keeping it simple, have some short, punchy phrases, or even just, positionality statement, one thing that you would like to say in this interview. And if you are wanting to improve public speaking skills, interview skills, then take any opportunity that you can to speak in public. You can do small workshops, community, volunteer, all sorts of different opportunities. And just keep saying yes, keep getting the practice. So I really, I would encourage that as well. So first of all, why agree to an interview? And this is a personal choice, obviously, but there's a few reasons why you might agree to doing an interview. To share your research. I think we do research to share the research. I think this is really important, and it's no good if it's just sitting in a journal gathering dust. So sharing our research. Possible collaborators could be listening in. Funding might be listening in. Someone who can benefit from your research could be listening, and that's a really big one for me. And you're teaching people about your work. There may be a list of reasons why you might not do an interview as well. In the last 3 months of my PhD, I was certainly declining, some podcasts and just really having to, my mind was just not in the right place to be sharing information because I was so scattered myself in trying to. So there might be different reasons, or you might feel like you're not the right person for what that person's looking for. So you might send the journalist to a colleague, or you might be a bit unsure of the person. So do a little bit of research on who's asking, what they're asking for. Make sure you get enough information from them to know that you're comfortable. What are they using it for? I've, had different experiences of doing an interview, and then all of a sudden there's kind of like an ad on the air, and it's like, oh, and come and do our workshop. And I was like, oh, I just don't know that I signed up for that. So, you can ask before all of that comes out. And you might just agree to do an interview to practice. You might just want to practice. So that's also a great reason to do it. Preparation for the interview. My preparation looks a little bit like this. Like, I really like highlighters and, messy papers and things like that. You might first know your journalist. So find out about them, if they've been doing interviews, if it's a radio host, or if it's someone that does regular interviews. The more that you know about that interview style, the better. And they're on your team. Remember that they're on your team. And there could be little things like, there might be something that they always do. They always ask a particular question. And if you know what that question is and you're prepared for it, it can be a much better response. Know your audience. Of course, it's like writing. We really are speaking to the audience, and make sure that you're bringing them with you all the time. If I'm talking about chanting, I cannot assume that people know what chanting is, why people do chanting. So I'm going to tell people about that, and bringing them always with you. Keep it simple, keep it simple. Keep it simple. So the simpler, the better, especially in very, very short periods of time. Finding your voice, both literally and metaphorically. Doing vocal warm-ups is, like, we do that for singing, we do that for acting, and we don't necessarily learn to do it for presenting or interviews. So it's an important thing to do. And also, again, just about authenticity and making sure that you're sticking with your values and what aligns with you, making sure that you're not going out of that zone. Expect a little bit of chaos on the day. So, often we think, oh yeah, just before it, I'll just, do a little bit of meditation and I'll do some deep breathing. But usually you're trying to fix some technology, or someone hasn't turned up, or something's, there's always a little bit of chaos. So try to expect that and do your preparation before. This is coming back to knowing your journalist. So preparing for any last chances to say something profound. I've often been caught out with like a question. So these are some examples. So any final thoughts you would like to share? So this isn't a tricky question about my research or anything like that, but it's kind of a really amazing opportunity if you have something like that prepared. If you don't have something like that prepared, it can be a ramble, or it can be something that you didn't actually want to share. It can lead to all sorts of, So, and it's any final thoughts, right? So this is like your last little bit. So it's really good to have like a short, simple phrase that you would like to share. Another thing is maybe, where can people find out more information? So know where you want to send people. You know, like you might be recruiting at the time for a study or whatever it is that you're actually wanting like to share. It might be a particular part of your work that you want to share. So send them to that website or that place or whatever social media channel. There can be all sorts of different questions. So if you go to the interviewer, there might be, you know, there's gratitude podcast. They might ask you what you're grateful for, anything. So presentation anxiety is incredibly common. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. There's a couple of ways that we can manage it. And one is like different styles of thinking. So reframing things in our mind. And the other thing is the physical things that we can do. So thinking it is only a conversation. It's only a conversation publicly available to the world. So it's all just fine. It can still be, it can provoke a little bit of anxiety still, but just thinking it's just a conversation, you know. Reframing stress into excitement, you've probably all heard of that, sort of the same physiological response. So, you know, your heart's racing and just going, yeah, I'm really excited and passionate about, you know, sharing my research today. The passion has to be bigger than the fear. I would put who quote that, but it seems that everybody has quoted that. So I'm just putting it in quotation marks. And that's a big one for me is it's you get over it because the message that you want to get across is more important than that anxiety that you're going to have to go through. And this is another really big one for me. It is not about you. This is really not about you. So it is about your message and it's about your audience. So just taking ourselves out of the equation, and that can really help to both keep us humble and also just taking the pressure right off us. Your body and your voice are your tools, so looking after them. That's things like eating well, sleeping well, exercise, stay hydrated, and, you know, not just having a glass of water 5 minutes before you're talking, but staying hydrated the night before, staying hydrated the whole day. I find one of the best warm-ups before a presentation is actually just going for a good walk. You know, just remembering that we are using our voice and our body. Yeah, little things you can do right before. You can hum to warm up your voice, get into your body. You can run on the spot. You can just do a little bit of stretching. You can massage like around the chest or the jaw, and breathe. So you can take a breath. We can try it now if you like. So just like taking in a breath through the nose and then holding the breath for 4 seconds and then exhaling out through the mouth. And something like that, just to prepare. So this is just a little reminder for me to tell you a story about my experience. So from panic attacks to presenting, the picture here on the left is a little boardroom of people, and I was in a boardroom full of, I don't know, maybe there were, I can't really remember, maybe 8 people in there, and I was in a group interview. It wasn't media or anything like that. It was well before my research. And they were speaking, and then it came to me and they said, so Gemma, what do you think about that? And I stood up and I said, you know what? I actually have to go. and I left the room. You know, they chased me down the corridor. I got in the elevator, pushing the buttons, and I just left the premises completely. So I guess I just want to say that there's hope for everybody. to be able to do this. And I'm not a natural. I had to really learn all of this. And that's a picture of me at the end there at my brother's wedding, doing the emceeing for that wedding, which was more terrifying than any radio or television interview that I've ever done. And so it's just being, really mindful that we do have to learn these things. Some of us have to learn them. I've had to learn it. So what to say, what not to say? What are you prepared to say? So thinking about that in your preparation, you have control over everything that you say. So you can be asked something that is beyond what you want to say. I've been asked a few questions about my own practice or my own experiences. And sometimes I am really happy to share that. But I've found once I was asked about my meditation practice and my chanting practice, I went into all of these details. And afterwards I went, I didn't mind sharing that, but actually I think it was just kind of, I probably started losing the listeners because it was just a bit too much. So just still thinking about your connection to the listener and how much detail and all that kind of thing. Have some outs. So if there's questions that you just really don't want to answer, or you find that the interviewer is going off topic, then you can have a particular phrase, one that you're really comfortable with that you can use. There's a few options here. No, but what I can tell you is, we haven't reported that, but what we did report is there is speculation, but we actually know. Good question, but the issue really is. So just different ways of redirecting the conversation. And you are always on the record. This is another thing that I have learned, whether it's emailing, the journalist, or speaking before the actual interview, you're always on the record. So talk about staying grounded in these difficult situations. So what if you don't have the answer? You don't want to answer. So again, maybe it's getting to personal, or it's getting to something that's really not about your research. Or what about you go blank? So what you can do, you can acknowledge the question. You could ask for it to be repeated. Tell them you're thinking about it. You could do a little bit like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and think aloud, and just sort of, you're still engaged with it and thinking about it. Pause, breathe. It's totally fine. You can pause and you can breathe. You can have a tool or an object or a phrase that again comes back to those outs. Maybe you've chosen a phrase. You're like, okay, if I go blank, or if I don't want to, this is what I'll do. You might have that, or a gesture to calm you down. You can have like a piece of jewelry or whatever. Call it. Just say, my mind has gone blank. And so has everyone else's at some stage. So it's really fine. Yeah. So post-interview, first of all, celebrate. You did great. And next, if you can you bear to watch it? So it does take some practice to be able to do this. Can someone else bear to watch it? So if they can't, you can't, then I'm not sure. But if somebody can, then you can ask for feedback. And often if you can watch it or listen to it, it is sometimes actually not as bad as you thought it was. So we often remember things quite differently to the way that they happened, especially when we're really high in anxiety. So listening to it back could actually be really beneficial. And it is just, yeah, you can really learn so much. If it's a video, you might see like a little habit that you have and you're like, oh, I do that a bit, like maybe next time I'll try not to do that. Or you might have a fill-in word. I had fill-in words, so I had for a while that I would use, and then I was like, I can't say and the next one I had a different fill-in word, and then after that I said I can't do that, or and then I had another fill-in word again. So it just depends. It takes a lot of time. Be prepared to be contacted after the interview. People might read the paper or hear your interview. The people that you may least expect, like your relatives and everyone, but also people that might want to collaborate, people that want to tell you about their work, people that, you could be contacted quite a bit after it. There's sometimes a bit of a whirlwind of media, and it could be another interview. Be prepared for criticism. So I hate to tell you that not everybody loves us or what we do, and I have certainly had some criticism post interviews and newspaper articles, and my research really isn't that controversial. So I'm sure if you're saying something that's it could be anything. So again, this is not about you. And if you do want to engage with it, sometimes it can be private, sometimes it can be public. I was kind of publicly shamed on LinkedIn after something that was shared. I think it was a newspaper article, and I was tagged, my institution was tagged, and they said some pretty nasty things. And I said, thank you. So I said, thank you for your feedback. You don't have to engage with this at this point. I wanted to, and I said, thank you so much for your feedback. My intention is not to, whatever they were saying, and it completely diffused the situation. And this person was just completely changed their tune. But if I had gotten emotionally engaged, then it could have just exploded into a lot of problems. So I really, if it's really just awful and you don't want to engage, just don't. That's not, you don't need to. But saying thank you is quite amazing. So thank you for your feedback, and then perhaps whatever you would like to clarify with them. Post-interview blues. Now, this is also a thing, and it's quite common. And the first time I kind of experienced this, I tried to look it up and I couldn't find anything on it. Like, it only had sort of job interviews and it didn't have anything like about the public stuff. So it is quite common. And this is when really, this is more about self-criticism rather than others criticizing us. So similar to performing, yeah. So self-criticism, this is about you. Okay, this is about you. So what can you do? You can write it down. Often when we get it out of our heads and the rumination, and we write down, this is what I said was just whatever it is that you're ruminating about. It was so terrible and so awful. And write it down, and you'll probably find that it wasn't that big a deal. Maybe talk to someone. Was it really that bad? Yes. What can you do about it? Perhaps you can eat a cookie, or remember what actually went well. So we do often ruminate about, that one tiny little thing that went horribly wrong. So even if you've got a paper and you've got like that one typo, that's what you're thinking about. But what about the rest of the paper? What went well in the interview? And even if nothing went well in the interview, you showed up for an interview, and that's still, that's good on you. No, it wasn't that bad. You might still like to eat a cookie. So yeah, many options. Also post-interview, sometimes the print is not sent to you before printing if it's a newspaper article. Oh no. Yeah, so you may not have an opportunity to read it before it goes out. If it's not everything that you dreamed it would be and more, then that's okay. But if there's something that's really quite detrimental to you or a colleague, you might be able to get your institution to help retract it. If it's really, really terrible, it's probably not going to be, but know that there are resources if you do need to. Sometimes things don't get printed or put out publicly. Oh no. So you might have done really a lot of work towards that. This again, not about you. This is generally about other news or timing. So for example, pandemic outbreaks, they trump chanting research. So I was contacted by New Zealand radio and they wanted to do a piece on chanting and I was quite excited about that. But then, New Zealand, I think, I don't know, they had one case or something. So everything went on the news. And the other thing is that picture that I have at the front of this talk was a setup for an interview that actually never got publicly released. And, I got all dressed up. I did my preparation. I legged it into the city. I thought the interview went really well, was really happy with it. And it's somewhere collecting dust. So sometimes it's just out of our control. And did we waste all of our time? Probably not. It's still all really great practice and it makes us think about our research in a different way. And yeah, we need so much practice at this. I do anyway. After the interview, it's good to keep a record of the interview or the print. This might be helpful to share when people ask you about your research. So I have like a little snippet from this ABC thing that they came and like looked at our experiment setup, and I still haven't published that research, but when people ask me about it, I can share this little 1-minute video that just shows our whole experiment, and it's really great. It might be useful for your CV. It's great to have media engagement on your CV. And you might even just attach it to a blog or a media page on your website as well. So in summary, preparation, know your interviewer, know your audience, know what you want to say. Maybe write down 3 main points before the interview or even just one. During the interview, relax. It's only a conversation. Be yourself. Be concise, and then post-interview, listen back if you can. It is worth it. Ask for feedback from colleagues that you trust. Remember what went well, and maybe have a little bit of a celebration. So thank you everyone for listening, and I'm happy to have a chat about any questions that anyone has.